Why are there growing calls for the license fee to be scrapped? Why does it increasingly feel like the time is up for the BBC in its current form, languishing, living off a license fee which is funded by the public, who are threatened with jail unless they pay it? I think there's a couple of reasons for that. The obvious one, the most commonly spoken about, is bias, and the other one is competition, foreign and domestic. And I think that both of these two factors that are leading to this chorus, this really loud calls, increasingly so for the BBC to change and the license fee to be scrapped, are animated by sort of a technological change in the way that we all consume media, and particularly broadcasting. So let's start with bias. When people watch the BBC on TV, and lots of people who didn't read newspapers, they get their only news broadcast for the day via the BBC in the evenings, and the BBC would present the news, as the presenter at the time saw was impartial, and people would quite often accept that unquestioningly. They trusted the BBC, and nowadays that broadcast in the evening is one of multiple ways people get the news. In fact, actually, they're on their phones all day. They're seeing citizen journalists running down the road, tweeting live videos. They're seeing all different sources of media. And so when they watch the BBC reports in the evening, they can actually see that there are other narratives out there. There are events that were missed. There are events that might have been overemphasized. There are other ways of looking at the day's news events. And they can see that actually the version of events that was presented by the BBC news presenter in that evening was probably not as balanced as it claimed to be. I actually believe that there is no such thing as sort of unbiased, impartial news. I think it's a myth. I think that every media organisation has an agenda, and every person that presents at the news and every journalist has, biases they might be conscious of, and those things that they care about will always get thrust to the fore. It transpires in whatever story they choose to make the biggest story in the world that day. There might be a flood in Indonesia, or there might be a migrant crisis in Greece, and that says a lot about how they view the world, what they choose to make the most important story. So anyway, I digress a little bit, but the important point is that people get a lot more news, and we saw this really, really poignantly during the Black Lives Matter protests, where the public were watching sort of crazy demonstrations on their phone, real violence. There was that video of like a bike being thrown into a police horse, and then the BBC wheeled out their presenter that evening, and the presenter said they were peaceful, mostly peaceful protests, and people just went, rubbish, I've just seen the violence, I've just seen it. So, there is the fact that the internet is sort of making anger against false claims of bias more prominent and more common. And this is affecting different broadcasters, but it's affecting the BBC the most, because we are forced, on pain of jail and pain of state violence, to pay for it. So we don't feel like we should put up with it, rightly so. The other bias issue that's come to the fore, which is also animated by the internet, is sort of staff giving their views online. This is what the new Director General, Tim Davies, has made very clear, that he is really angry about people like Lewis Goodall and all other presenters sort of just, basically campaigning, and tweeting really, really partisan views online. And that's a really interesting one. I think that the BBC staff have clearly always had those views, and now we're just actually seeing them. We're seeing them, which I think is kind of useful. These people have an agenda, and I think it's actually useful to see them being so plain about it on Twitter and online. And if these staff do get censored effectively for working at the BBC, which he's promised to do, that's not solving the problem. It's just hiding it. So the bias question has really been sped up, I think, by the internet. There has been a collapse in trust in journalists generally. YouGov have done some really, really shocking polls on this. Go and have a look at it. But it all really dates back to the Brexit vote, when people really felt there was a disconnect. A lot has been said about that, and that was obviously 4 or 5 years ago. We still haven't left the EU, but enough has been said about that. But there has been an increasing polarisation since then. I don't think that's anything unusual or particularly negative. Politics changes from day to day, but there's that factor, there's the politics that have changed, but I think the internet really has brought into the fore the bias of these broadcasters. So that's the one big sort of problem that's accelerating, I believe, the downfall of the BBC. The other one is competition. So the BBC a few years ago had a huge proportion of sort of the market share in online viewing. In particular, the BBC iPlayer was really early to launch. It was good when it launched. It was ahead of its time. Since then, it's been dwarfed, overtaken by Netflix, Amazon, and now Disney. So the internet has sort of accelerated calls for the BBC to actually adopt a commercial model and compete with the likes of Amazon, compete with them, and get as large and global and profitable as they were. But instead, the BBC is sort of stuck leeching off the British public, stuck on this telly tax that is effectively the license fee. And they failed to modernise, and they've been left behind. And I think people are starting to see, well, hang on a minute, you could have become British media is still very popular. We make some of the best films. We have some of the best journalists in the world, undoubtedly. But because the majority of our broadcasters, the BBC is huge. It dwarfs. It sort of smothers the industry. They're all tied up in the BBC, and they're not exploiting the commercial opportunity that has been presented by the globalized nature of news media, particularly broadcasting, that the internet has given us. So they've missed a trick there, and also they're making us pay effectively for a failing project, which could be doing a lot more. So I mean, and simultaneously they're sort of crushing local newspapers. They're crushing local newspapers. They're the BBC website in particular. I'm a former tabloid journalist myself, and the sports journalists wanted to put all their journalism behind a paywall, and they can't because the BBC is just providing it for free. Why are you going to pay to read it on the Star or the Mirror or the Sun when you can just get it off the BBC for free? So they're sort of drowning out local newspapers. They're squashing competition, and I think that really is also being emphasised on the internet now, because so many people are actually going online, like myself right now, making a YouTube video, and they're sort of trying to get around the BBC because it dominates the market. Other commercial outfits struggle to make a profit because the BBC is just churning out all this free content, and they can't build subscription models because of the BBC. So independent people like me go on YouTube, they get their views, and there's more and more views now. And recently, very recently, there's been some news reports about both Discovery coming in with a project to set up a new, what's been labelled sort of a right-wing news service, and Rupert Murdoch's News UK is also rumoured to be looking into it, because there's a gap in the market. Whether or not they can make that profitable with the likes of the BBC, we'll have to see. But both of these organisations are apparently looking at doing it with an internet model online, get around Ofcom. Ofcom being the regulator. Which that's an argument for another day, but I think the regulator and the BBC quite often work hand in hand. They enforce a sort of BBC model of impartiality or fake impartiality on all of the broadcasts in this country, and that may well have to change as well as the internet drives a more diverse and lively, and I think better sort of British media landscape when the BBC's licence fee is scrapped. I mean, campaigning to defund the BBC, which I do proudly, is a positive vision. We are hoping to increase media diversity in the UK and make sure that the media in this country better serves the people in this country and succeeds commercially around the world and grows. So I want to defund the BBC because I believe in British broadcasting, and I think the British Broadcasting Corporation, as it is crushing that. So yeah. And there's also the whole other question about high BBC pay and all those other annoying questions, but maybe I'll do another video on them another time. But if you like this one, please hit subscribe. I'm going to try and do a few of them going forward, or look out for me on the radio, on the Defund the BBC social media pages. All right, thanks for watching.